Hello and welcome to our third round with Breaking Goryos. I've come to the conclusion I will keep basically anything with a cantrip these days, and this hand is close enough to doing something. It's kind of missing multiple cards, but Serum Visions will make it all work. So we drew one of them, perfect, done. You know, Serum Visions, we drew another through the breach, we bottomed a land and another through the breach. So all we're trying to do is get mana, but the land's kind of slow, and I figure I can get another land, especially with like flashback loot, or that wasn't looting, especially with drawing a looting at some point. I'm not worried about the fifth mana source here. Uh, that's pretty nice. That means we get to go off next turn. That's basically a land, right? Because we can play our third land, discard Emrakul, and then Goryo's in response. It is kind of awkward that we don't get the discard before we get to. We don't get the discard on our opponent before we have to fire, but our opponent's a sleight of hand deck. They're not going to be interacting with us game one anyways. Uh, if my opponent didn't sleight of hand, if they like visioned on one, I would have been firing off this brutality immediately to duress them and then trying to get to my fourth land, I think. Maybe I would have waited a turn and try to get the maximum, like, best possible card, but not entirely sure there. But my opponent passes with mana up, but I'm not in a position to wait. They're a combo deck. I'm not going to let them combo. And look, I comboed them, and then they started casting some irrelevant spells, and then they died. Great job. Okay, sideboarding. I kind of just shaved a little bit of everything off the top for some interaction. That is something I will end up reconsidering, spoiler alert, before game. Okay, so game 2 with Goryo's Vengeance. This hand is... I ended up keeping it under the logic that I'm like partway through the breach already. And I was like, it's not perfect, but what is? But it doesn't really get me anywhere fast. I should have considered that my opponent is playing. I knew this from game one. They're playing Barrel Storm, so the card Barrel Chief of Compliance is basically additional Goblin Electromancers. And having a ton of copies of that card lets you layer into a Gifts Ungiven that goes off pretty easily. I mean, you can like chain Gifts Ungiven and stuff. So I should have kept a slightly faster hand, I think. But at this point, my opponent untapped with a barrel, and I was pretty sure it was dead. Somehow I got an untapped step. Merchant Scroll is a cool one. I like that. You can gifts for like Past in Flames Merchant Scroll rituals, and then Past in Flames your Merchant Scrolls, get another gifts, and just keep chaining off. But if I wasn't dead before, certainly certainly dead here. And so here I opt to use hand size to discard Griselbrand and kind of hope that my opponent doesn't hit anything good, which they go off, and we're going to kind of step through a little bit of this. They make a bunch of mana. I can't really do anything. If I had an additional or a different land, I could Goryo's back Griselbrand, try to draw a Dispel. And I was kind of hoping that my opponent would be able to like attack with the barrel, and I'd get back Griselbrand and block and kill their thing, gain life, and draw a bunch of cards and kill them next turn. But what's the next turn? So they gifts. The pile they end up setting up with gifts is Manamorphose, 2 rituals, and a Past in Flames. Lets them make a bunch of mana, and then they can Merchant Scroll for the next gifts, or gifts for a Grape Shot. And at this point, the actual Moto Storm counter is just going up, and they're basically guaranteed to kill me here. Actually, literally guaranteed, because, yeah. And now I have the information that they have Dispel in their deck for game 3. Not a lot I could have done that game besides mulligan that hand, which maybe I should have. I had a slow route to victory, but probably was a little bit too slow considering the matchup. So I had a little bit of a revelation in sideboarding here, which is that I want to be a little more controlling. And by a little, I guess I mean a lot. But I sideboarded basically all the interaction and the painful truths with the idea that I also brought back in the looting and the through the breach. So not going to have targets for Kari Zev's expertise. Don't want to worry about it. Just going to play the rest of my deck, even though it walks into Dispel. I'm going to overload on interaction and just beat them on that axis. I have Painful Truths and Looting, which let me filter through dead interaction, so I'm not concerned about the typical thing where you actually just literally have too many cards that interact with Storm. And somehow this fell out of my deck here. I believe I took out the other Cathartic. I had a Fatal Push my deck just as like a one piece of interaction. Here we go. That's what it was. I did not have both Spell Pierces because they get dead fast. Um, the Fatal Push is just one way, to kind of pick off an early Electromancer or Barrel. I didn't expect it to do a ton, but hopefully it's just there when it counts. So welcome to our third game with Goryo's versus Barrel Storm. This hand could literally be anything, so I kept it. I think this is better than a mulligan. It's basically like, the logic is like, oh, well, this hand's pretty bad. It looks like a 6, but with a 6, I had to get a scry. Well, with this 6-card hand, because I'm casting all these lootings, I get a looting, which is just better than a scry. So I draw some bricks. I discard the looting because I don't want to go down too many cards, and that might have been wrong, but I'm going to get a ton of card filtering just from casting it from graveyard. So fetch before you scry with vision. Paying the life. I'm going to leave up Spell Pierce and just try to hit something here. And there's a debate about whether my opponent's 2-drop is... So that was the Spell Pierce on 1 I'm leaving up. Didn't cast Visions there, just to hit a cantrip. But now that my opponent's probably going to cast like a Barrel or Electromancer, now I definitely want to fire Serum Visions. I'm not going to be interacting with their card the next turn. I want to be able to find something. So here, I keep the Fatal Push for the presumed creature, bin the Dispel because I have too much interaction already. They just miss a land drop, so I'm going to just Cathartic Reunion away the bonus lands I have and keep the interaction and draw a bunch of bonus lands that don't do anything. I opt to use the Graveyard Faithless Looting as opposed to the one in hand because card quantity does matter. Here I put the other looting into my graveyard and start assembling my 5th land for a top deck Through the Breach. And here I fire Collective Brutality to try and clear a Dispel first. I like all my cards, so I didn't escalate it. I take the Dispel, see that there's an Empty the Warrens and a bunch of rituals that I'll have to handle at some point. But I'd rather deal with the Dispel than my opponent draws a land and then just has Dispel with Spell Pierce back up. I choke my opponent, prevent them from Ritual, Manamorphose, Electromancer, do a bunch of stuffing me, which I guess I had interaction for, but I didn't really want to consider what the end line is. If they go Ritual, Morphose, all this stuff, I think that could end poorly for me. So my opponent missing land drops is now going to lose all their lands. That's pretty great. And here I just have to kind of assemble the last couple damage, which I'm not doing a very good job of. The one thing I didn't consider with escalating the first, I guess I didn't have the second at the time, but if I escalate the first Brutality, then draw the second one, I actually put my opponent to 1, which shuts off not just pay lands, but fetch lands, so that was kind of worth considering. But I think keeping Fatal Push was better. So now that my opponent's drawn the card, I make a pretty egregious error. I misclicked the escalate here. I was trying to do discard and drain. I just got the drain. And as a result, my opponent makes a bunch of goblins, and I end up dying to those in a spot where I would have been able to avoid it, I think. Fire the Fatal Push and hope it chokes them up, but obviously it doesn't. They obviously have another ritual, and they make a million goblins. And in the 2 turns, I do end up hitting the out, but they have a remand to stop me. I think if I didn't screw this up and I was able to take out the Empty the Warrens, this game would have gotten interesting because that was just a remand and not a Dispel. But as is, the misclick on casting that did cost me the game. I felt like the heavy interaction was pretty good. It just happened with the timing that I ended up using all of my cards. I think it's still possible the 4th Faithless Looting's not good here, but at the same time, it probably just, it's good and it's not good. You want the interaction, but you also want to filter away the interaction sometimes, so I don't know. Their counter interaction, their counterplay and clock and everything is kind of obnoxious. I think that it's the fact that if you let them be the deck that has interaction and the fast combo, and if you're just the fast combo deck, you're going to lose. And if you have interaction and combo, your deck becomes worse, just like theirs does, and you just have to fight them on this kind of cripple fight. But the problem is that like this deck, I think will perform a lot better against decks that don't force you to go down this road with like this huge stack of other interaction, where you're allowed to sideboard into a mostly combo deck, or still like a solidly combo deck. Um, Also, having to cut the breaking entering kind of made me a little threat light. So I think that is just this perfect storm of the like sideboard position that my opponent took with this specific deck made the post board games but possible to lose. I think that it was still fine to be in the spot I was at. It's just this is a situation that can play out that you can lose from.